welcome to the very first episode of the Ripple Effect. So, if you're not hip to what the Ripple Effect is, let's see if I can get this started. So, if you're not hip to what the Ripple Effect is, it has been my Substack, my labor of love for the past 2 years, just over 2 years. And basically, what I've done on Substack is try to give a political or cultural critique of the current events, of the political going-ons or economic going-ons of the world. Currently, I might even take a look back if I think that the context is relevant for what's going on right now. But that's in a nutshell what the ripple effect is. But I have come to find out that the process of writing and I guess what I aspire to write and what I shoot for with my Substacks does take a long time. It might not seem like it, but it does. And I hope that by transitioning to a video essay rather than a written essay, I can reach a wider audience, make my process a little bit more efficient, and then hopefully everybody gets something out of it. But without further ado, this is the Ripple Effect. I'm your host, Henry Twagirayezu, and let's get started. So, the ripple effect, what is it? The way that I see it, it's independent media, opinion journalism nonetheless, but opinion journalism, and I'm going to be looking at the works of investigative journalists and other opinion journalists to give you guys information that I hope is useful, adds a little something to your day in terms of maybe even if it's not the most upbeat topics, I'm hoping that everybody can get something out of it. And I'm also hoping to have kind of like a public sphere in the comment section. I'm not saying that it's going to be 100% respectful. I don't expect it to be that way. Actually, no. My Substack has been incredibly respectful in terms of the comment sections and the comments that I've received. The exchanges that I've had with people have been nothing but pleasant, and I hope that's the way that things remain going into this. But it doesn't have to be that way either. I'm hoping to offer a cultural criticism, like I said, or an opinion that is not just my thoughts, but I'm hoping to kind of keep taking a temperature as to what the national mood is, and then hopefully put out work that reflects what we're all feeling. It's not always going to be like that. Sometimes it's just going to be Henry's thoughts and Henry's opinions and Henry's analysis. And my latest piece on Substack, I called, well, not my latest one, but the one before that one, it was called on Stupidity, Cowardice, and Rage, a rhetorical crash out. And for example, that one was almost exclusively my thoughts. I think it was exclusively my thoughts. And so it's not going to be like a forum for discussion each and every single time. Okay, so background, I have a degree in economics, and I obtained a degree from James Madison University in 2022, so almost 3 years ago. Now, I have an interest in politics, and I've always had an interest in politics, going back to the time that I was a child. And my background in terms of like working is in finance, specifically in capital markets. Full disclosure, I do see the ripple effect as complementary media, as in this should not be your only source of media. It's supposed to be, my take. Again, I cannot emphasize the word opinion enough. So in my world, my viewers are consuming my work, but they're also consuming the work of David Dane, Ben Norton, Brianna Joy Gray, Ryan Grimm, Jeremy Scale, all those kinds of guys. Glenn Greenwald, those kinds of people. So again, full disclosure, this is complementary media. And as such, I am going to have a few biases, and I think that it's best to kind of get those out the way. Western hegemony is a driver of wealth inequality and that is true at home and abroad. What I mean by Western hegemony, um, it's the way that the West currently dictates how the rest of the world operates, whether it's through the weaponization of the dollar, which I will get into later on, or the political clout and the soft power that we have in international bodies such as the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, etc. Um, all of that leads to inequality at home and abroad. At home, the way that it leads to inequality is the fact that the more we chase soft power, the more we chase uh, global influence through the means of foreign aid, um, military ventures, all of these imperial projects that we take on abroad that are meant to only stifle wealth within the top 1% or the same top whatever percent that currently holds all the wealth within the United States. That's that working at home, right? So abroad, the way that we contribute to this inequality is through one, exporting our inflation through the dollar, which is the global currency, the global reserve currency, forcing other countries to conduct business using the dollar, even if there is when their trade has nothing to do with the United States, we still force them to purchase dollars in order to conduct their business, which again forces us or forces them to depend on us in order to do their business, which is the inequality coming in abroad. Okay, so then we have the American oligarchy as a threat to both global and national security. These two might seem similar on their face. These 2 points might seem similar on their face, but one is talking about an economic inequality, and the second point is more talking about the like national security, as in like military ventures, etc. So, what I mean by the American oligarchy being a threat, both at home, uh, our national security, but then international security as well. I believe that they're a threat to national security at home because, again, they are willing to sacrifice the well being of American citizens in order to pursue their interests abroad. That means that the average American citizen cannot get health care because we're too busy buying F-22s and F-35s that have a 48% efficacy rate or whatever. We're too busy. Obviously, each dollar that goes towards those fighter jets does not go towards healthcare, does not go towards affordable housing, does not go towards infrastructure, does not go towards any of the things that we need as a country, and instead goes towards helping Israel and Ukraine fight off demons of their own making. And honestly, Ukraine, I wouldn't even say that it's Ukraine's making, it's our making. That particular demon is our making. And if you want to know more about that, I wrote a piece on Substack called "You're Being Lied to About Two Wars, Not One." So you can check that out. I detail all of the things that NATO did in order to provoke the Russians into attacking us. And all of these might seem like crazy takes, but I think the more time goes on, the more we're going to start to see people expressing these types of views because it's no longer taboo to say things like, you know, we expanded NATO 1,000 times with Yeltsin, Putin, and all of these Russian presidents telling us that this is unacceptable. And we continue to poke that bear right until we or we try to put NATO forces on their borders. And that would mean also NATO weapons, including nuclear weapons, because NATO has nuclear weapons on their border, which is something that they were very much adamant about. And they said, we're not going for that. And they weren't. So we learned, right? But so that's that on the American oligarchy. But then also late stage capitalism and shareholder capitalism in particular is also at the root cause of all of these problems. We as a country have decided to pivot away from looking uh, at economics through the lens of what does this do for the average American? What does this do for our country? And we have decided to act as if we are, you know, our leaders act as if they're members of C suites rather than uh, um, members of a political system. C suite actors think quarterly. C suite actors uh, are only in it for themselves because they see their tenure as temporary. You and honestly, yeah, it is as a democratically elected leader, it is temporary. Your tenure is temporary, but you're not supposed to think about it that way. You're not supposed to think about it exclusively through the lens of your own interests. There's a reason why developed countries and nations think, for example, China, think in centuries. They don't think in 4 years or 4 months. There's a reason for that, right? So we'll get into that a little bit more about, what late stage capitalism is, what shareholder capitalism is, and how it connects to all of these issues that I was just talking about. Full disclosure, excuse me, full disclosure, I'm gonna talk a lot about the problems that we're facing, but I am under no impression that I have the answers as to how to tackle these problems. I've read a few books that have fantastic suggestions. One of them is Plunder by Brendan, I want to say Blau. I think that's how you pronounce it. But Plunder by Brendan. And he talks extensively about shareholder capitalism. He doesn't call it that, but what he describes, this liberal neoliberal form of economics, is exactly what I'm also going to be focusing on because I do see it as an existential issue. He's one of those authors who genuinely does give fantastic and well informed solutions to some of these problems, but I highly doubt that anybody can really say, I've got this all figured out and here's what we need to do. But here's my take on what we need to do. I think first we need to address the rampant corruption going into this country. And first we need to address it as such. I think this bullshit use of euphemisms like, well, Congress members and senators shouldn't be allowed to trade, shouldn't be allowed to, apart from the trades themselves, right? And when I mean the trades, I mean stock trades, right? Apart from the fact that they're able to speculate on the stock market while also governing what happens on the stock market, obviously that presents a conflict of interest. But apart from that, these people also partake in blatant forms of corruption. We have a senator from New Jersey who is currently facing corruption because I believe he gave the blueprints to the American embassy in Egypt to the Turkish government or something like that. And in exchange for that, they got his wife a new Mercedes. They gave him 2 gold bars or something like that. And that was his second time, by the way, getting caught. Not his second time doing this, but the second time that we know of. That was the second time getting caught by, I believe it's Senator Menendez. And then we also have the Congress member, I think it's New York's 8th district or something. Um, uh, his name escapes me, but a Congress member literally falsified his entire resume. Nobody caught him until he was already in office. So anyway, so addressing the rampant corruption would be a fantastic place to start. Um, Balancing the socio-economic inequality that's going on in this country. Again, the wealth inequality due to shareholder capitalism. Um, that would be also a great place to start, and also bringing to light all the demons in our national closet. What do I mean by this? It seems as though each time that somebody is found to have broken the law in the most egregious, blatant way possible, there's never a follow up or enough of a follow up process to figure out exactly what laws were broken, how it's supposed to get resolved, who needs to be held accountable, etc. The prime example of this is Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz apparently paid 17-year-olds to have sex with him on multiple occasions, yet this man is not in prison. The worst thing that happened to him is that he had to give up his nomination to Trump's cabinet position. I think he was supposed to be AG. That's the worst thing that has happened to him. So that happens. Zero accountability. There's obviously the whole Hillary Clinton thing with her laptops using servers, personal servers, to conduct official business. There's the 91 felony charges that our current president was facing due to the mishandling of documents, just getting away with things that you and I could never dream of getting away with. So all of these demons, and then we can go all the way back to the assassination of JFK, which happened, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, and to this day, the full investigation has not been released. That is not the way that a normal country functions. You're not. How are you supposed to make sure that these things don't happen over and over and over again when what even happened is not released until 100 years later, let alone making sure that the people who partook in whatever illegal activity that might have happened are actually getting held accountable? None of that happens. And right now, the longer we allow people to get away with committing atrocities, I believe there was a Palestinian group that sued Blinken and Biden for their active role in what's going on in Gaza. That's a good place to start. Literally actually holding these people accountable. Same could go for Boeing, right? Boeing, I mean, they're just, planes are falling out of the sky, they're crashing, turning into convertibles, zero accountability, right? I also wrote an article called On Leading Blacks, where I talked about the great financial crisis and the foreclosure on homeowners that happened using illegal documents, and the bullshit settlements that came out of that didn't really help anybody. All of these things, exposing these things and actually getting accountability. And what I mean by accountability is people go to prison. People go to jail. People get locked up for doing the kind of things that they have usually gotten away with in the United States. I talked about this a little bit ago, the rhetorical crash out. The best summary that I can come up with for my rhetorical crash out is that there were two reasons for it, or two sets of reasons for it. The first one is what I would call the meta reasons. That's the first category, which is the big picture, big pillars of the problems that I'm trying to describe here. And then there are triggers, which are basically the catalysts to my rhetorical crash out. And it had been a long time coming, and that's why it's a 31-minute read when you go on Substack. But the gist of this is that we have, or let me start with the meta reasons, right? The first one is that we have intellectual and spiritual laziness, or what I would call a perverted social contract. So the social contract is supposed to be that you do your best, I do my best, we all try our best, maybe if not our best, but something close to our best. We all get to be pretty well off, right? But we perverted the contract by saying, let's all do our worst, whether it's intellectually or spiritually, right? So intellectually, I'll never have to read, challenge myself, engage in debates with people who are, I'll never have to do that, and you'll never have to do that. We'll both remain shitty, uninspired, just as blech, right, as we've been. And the the benefit here is that we both get to not do shit, right? And it seems as if what we really want in the United States is to not do shit. So that laziness, right? That intellectual and spiritual laziness is my first meta reason. The second one is what I would call propaganda. And there's a Caitlin Johnston quote, which is actually right here at the bottom. Power is controlling what happens, but real power is controlling what people think about what happens. The American empire, the system, whatever you want to call it, has gotten really brazen with its acts. We just saw a genocide get televised um, for nearly 2 years, right? Or a year and a half. And journalists consistently asked Tony Blinken, Matthew Miller, what is going on? Why are our weapons being used to decapitate and liquefy children? And they just were like, I don't know. So they've gotten super brazen about these things, and they don't really care about about us knowing that they're doing these things, but it's more about how we think about them doing these things. So they do things to control, not not to limit our ability to see these things, but to help us with the way that we interpret them. So the way that we interpret them is supposed to be, hey, remember, this is the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, so don't accept anything that they say, even though the UN itself has said that they have consistently used the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers, and they've never been off. And each time that the Gaza Health Ministry reported numbers after Israel obliterated them, and then years later the UN came and validated those numbers, they found them to be reliable or within the margin of error. So all of these things that are supposed to be that are supposed to help us rationalize the carnage that we have been seeing. That's what I refer to as propaganda. There's also the American international bullying that happens. Again, I've alluded to it a little bit. Shareholder capitalism, and talked about that a little bit. But then there's the triggers, right? And my triggers were COVID-19, BLM, Gaza, and TikTok. And all of these are actually connected if you really think about it. And I'll explain how. So the meta reasons, like I said, the spiritual and intellectual laziness. We tend as Americans to not question the narratives that are being put in front of us. We have decided that we are just inherently special, different, better than everybody else, which is why we can just act with impunity, right? Whether it's at home or internationally. A great example of this ideology is the myth of American exceptionalism. And what I mean by this is things like manifest destiny, where we tell ourselves that God gave us this land, and therefore, if we genocide every Native American tribe in the process, that's just the cost of doing business. That is sick shit. And we have seen these types of ideas again manifest themselves in different ways, whether it's through again, bullshit ideas like manifest destiny, or the Monroe Doctrine that says that all of the Central American countries and South American countries are not actually sovereign nations, but just our backyard. The the idea itself changes, but the root of it is the same, which is that, again, we are American, we are naturally beyond reproach and exceptional. Um, and that could obviously not be further from the truth. But and that goes for every country, by the way. A lot of Americans seem to take offense when we say when you tell them that they're not that special, that we're not that special. And the thing is, that's true for everybody. That's not a dig, right? That's just facts. And then there's also the desire to evade accountability. Crystal, I don't know if put this in here, but I'll add it later on. But Cristobal has this clip where she's talking about how Bernie Sanders is telling a story with villains, right? And she was talking about James Carville essentially having conceded that Bernie Sanders was correct and he was wrong, and his outlook of the world was wrong, given that Kamala Harris got completely swept by Donald Trump. And he's basically saying, yeah, he was right. And then Joe Biden's speech that also talked about the American oligarchy. He talked about how Americans have faced similar that Americans have faced similar threats in the past, but we didn't punish the people who did what they did. And I think he's talking about probably like the Gilded Age and the type of inequality that we saw coming out of the early industrialization process, where there was no labor laws and all of that. And he's like, oh, we didn't punish people. And I think this idea that the bourgeoisie or the elites, the deep state, whatever, can do whatever they want to do, and the optimal thing, the virtuous thing to do is to let them completely get away with it. I don't buy that for a minute. A pound of flesh will have to be collected. The way that I see it, it will have to be extracted, and that's obviously metaphorically speaking. I'm not saying that we have to go out there and kill people, but what I am saying is that there has to be a cost borne by the people, the bourgeoisie, for having inflicted such deep suffering on their countrymen and the rest of the world. This idea that we're going to forgive and forget, we can forgive for sure, but I'm not forgetting. I don't know about you guys. I'm certainly not forgetting. But okay, so moving on to the propaganda piece, right? The media as a tool for the elite. The Wall Street Journal editorial board and everything it has published for the past 3 years against Lina Khan is a perfect example of this. The Wall Street editorial board has come out and said Lina Khan is the worst, and she's coming, for the American empire as we see it. She's anti-business. And it's just simply not true. It's simply not true. They keep making her out to be this person who's going to make goods more expensive because she's regulating, when it's actually her fighting off the people who have artificially increased prices and price gouged the fuck out of you, right? So she's absolutely not your enemy. She's out of her job now, but she was never your enemy. And another example, if the New York Times screams without words, which have been completely debunked by which is a piece that has been completely debunked by any journalist worth their salt ever since it came out, but they still stand by it. And then the best example is CNN with COVID-19. This one, the best way to really illustrate what I'm talking about here is to actually let this thing play out.
Truly, a repulsive individual to me, because it's somebody who clearly then did not believe many of the things he was saying whenever he was on CNN and was saying it for a paycheck, and is now trying to grift off of independent media audiences and transform himself into some truth sayer. Well, Dave, clearly had the receipts, and there was a great moment here. Let's take a listen.
Obviously, there was so much talk that they don't want you to take ivermectin. Ivermectin is the way to go. Take it. Joe Rogan got better from ivermectin. And by the way, I don't like what people did to Joe Rogan about ivermectin. I don't like
You did it.
No.
Yes, you did.
Find the clips.
Dude, find the clips. You shamed Joe Rogan.
Find the
You
clips.
said he's taking horse dewormer. You and Don Lemon were chuckling at each other about it. I'll go find
First
the
of all,
clip.
you just saw the clips. I'm not chuckling. I'm listening to Don. But
No. The clip I'm talking about wasn't on there, and it's absolutely there. Here, do we have it? Hold on. Let's play the clip. Injecting drugs for animals and horse.
And people telling them to.
Oh, my God.
What person? You talk about cancel culture and who to shame. Ivermectin, a dewormer, Really?
They are shaming themselves.
That's
no
what
one
it
has
is.
to shame them. They're shaming themselves.
So
you're taking a dewormer right now.
This
You can't apologize for that. You weren't being clear that it was this, and you know that, dude. You're being so dishonest right now, man.
I'm not
You were talking about ivermectin, the drug. You were not talking about this version of ivermectin. Come on,
I was responding to a situation where we were told that this is what people were searching out to take, and nobody knew what it was going to do to them. Look, I'm taking the drug right now. Obviously, I don't think it's all poison. I stopped calling it the horse drug when, and you can not like it, CNN's chief medical officer, who is Sanjay Gupta, said to me, you shouldn't just call it a horse dewormer. There's a whole legitimate aspect of the drug. I wouldn't use it for COVID-19, but it's not just a veterinary grade. So I stopped calling it that. So, okay. And then it went away.
All right, come on, man. I mean, the clip there moment was so good. And
But so yeah, he backtracks after getting called on his BS, and it's just so fascinating that he was so 10 toes down about it being a horse dewormer, but then suddenly it's, oh no, it's ivermectin. It's I'm taking it. But another great example of American propaganda is this idea that anti-Semitism is on the rise. I'm not saying that anti-Semitism doesn't exist, obviously, and I don't believe that anybody who is an honest actor would say that the anti-Semitism in the United States is zero. But this idea that it's on the rise and something that is so scary and worthy of 2 congressional hearings about is completely bullshit. That's completely fabricated with the intention of, again, trying to whitewash their crimes in Gaza and justify the havoc they've wreaked in West Asia. Another example of the United States propaganda machine at work is, I've talked about this again, the State Department and the way that they talk to journalists. So let's check this out recently between Sam Husseini and Tony Blinken.
3 people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please, sir, respect the process.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process. Well, everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminals, why aren't you in The Hague?
They want you to respect the process, and what they mean by that is bend over. Bend over. If you dare stand up for yourself and you say something like, you know what, I'm not actually going to respect the process that doesn't respect me or my life, or value, my family, my loved ones, etc. You're the one who's going to get called out of line, which is completely insane. And then here is the part that I really wanted to get to, which is the part about American international bullying. Again, I have a whole piece on this that you can check out on Substack, but here's this is from Glenn Greenwald, who's
the Russians started playing hardball on gas transfers across Ukraine. And Ukraine is heavily dependent on those revenues, but they also steal the gas. There's been a lot of controversy since independence between, of Ukraine from the Soviet Union, fighting over payment and theft of gas and this and that. And what the Russians did, Putin decided no one was getting any subsidy on gas anymore except Belarus. Everybody else was going to pay the market price. And Dick Cheney gave a big speech saying that this was extortion and using gas as a weapon and all of these things. That's the first time they really threw down the gauntlet against him. What had really turned them against him before that, I can't really say. I mean, he was the first person to call George W. Bush on September 11th. And he told him, listen, I'm with you. I hate these terrorists as much as you. I'll do anything to help you. You want to invade Afghanistan. You can use my bases in Central Asia that I got left over from the old days. and we'll help you with logistics and intelligence and everything you need for the war. Remember, in Afghanistan, we were the ones switching side in the war, not the Russians. And so he said, we'd be happy to help you with that. And then it was just 3 months later, that George W. Bush tore up the anti-ballistic missile treaty, and which immediately, we know now, but anybody could have guessed then, immediately led to the Russians embarking on a new program to develop essentially just more and better missiles to overwhelm our defenses. And so it was a terrible move and really a major step back in the Cold War. I mean, when Bill Clinton was expanding NATO, they hated it, but they were essentially trying to just take it on the chin with a smile and turn the other cheek and hope for a better day. You know, Yeltsin had ended up extremely mad at at Bill Clinton over the war in Serbia and so forth. But then he was gone within a year, and Putin came in and he tried to do a new reset with Colin Powell and George W. Bush, and they just would only ever let it go so far. And I have quote after quote after quote in the book of the various apparatchiks saying essentially, well, we just don't care about Russia. What are they going to do about it? They're not big enough to worry about. They're too big to be partners with, because then they'd have to try to have a say. So we have to leave them on the outside of all of our structures. But when it comes to their complaints, come on, they're a third-rate power. Remember, John McCain said, it's a gas station with H-bombs. They're nothing.
You see that? What was it? They're a gas station with H-bombs. Okay. How come we have not won against this gas station with H-bombs? They are a gas station with H-bombs, which we cannot defeat despite having poured so many resources and 3 years of money in bodies and mercenaries and all that stuff. Still can't beat them, right? And apart from the logical flaws with looking at them as a gas station with H-bombs, this gets to the idea of us, even if they were, does that mean that we can bully them? Is that what that means? And also, as Scott just explained, we have been expanding NATO since Bill Clinton was president. I was not born when Bill Clinton was president. But the war in Ukraine took place when I was in college, right? And then he talks about the ABM Treaty, right, of 1972, and the fact that we walked away from that treaty, not the Russians. I've already talked about the dollar dictatorship, and we definitely used that against the Russians when we froze their assets after they declared war on Ukraine, and kicked every bank out of the SWIFT banking system. So there's literally no way for Russians to bank internationally or to be included in any type of financial transactions with our trade partners. Or there wasn't. Obviously, they figured out workarounds now. But, you know, all of this bullying that we constantly do, here's another great example. It's Nicaragua, and this is Ben Norton giving us the skinny on.
In a region of the world, Central America, that has been attacked and invaded and occupied by the United States multiple times. The U.S. military has invaded and occupied Nicaragua 3 times in its history, and backed coup attempts and wars. And back in the 1980s, the CIA put mines in Nicaragua's ports. So instead of trying to help Nicaragua develop and increase its trade and grow its economy, the U.S. was blowing up its ports and carrying out these horrific acts of war to try to overthrow Nicaragua's leftist Sandinista government that came to power in a revolution after overthrowing a U.S.-backed right-wing dictator who ruled the country with an iron fist for decades, he and his family, the Somoza regime. And in 1986, the top UN legal authority, the International Court of Justice, announced that the U.S. owes reparations to the people of Nicaragua after it carried out war crimes and violated international law in carrying out these attacks on Nicaragua. So this is the so-called alternative that the U.S. is offering Latin America. Intervention, coups, wars. Meanwhile, China is telling countries in the region, you can have any system you want. We're not going to interfere. We want mutually beneficial win-win cooperation. China benefits because it gets access to more trading partners and it diversifies its trade relations, so it's no longer economically dependent on the US and the West that are aiming at trying to contain and destabilize China. And then, of course, the other countries in Latin America and Asia and Africa, they benefit because they get critical infrastructure. It helps them to develop, to grow their economy. They can trade with China as well. And at the end of the day, it is the West that is left out of this process because the US-led West only wants to maintain its hegemony and its domination of the world. And the US-led West only wants their corporation.
See, this is the problem with the American approach to global economics. Or even economics at home, we are more focused on getting riches or getting resources for the select few rather than actually invest in the bottom line worth of the region or the people. Or even our own people. Again, we are more concerned with extracting wealth as quickly as possible than maintaining anything of value that is going to hold up, for years to come, which is why all of these efforts that we make are incoherent. We're thinking, again, like we're members of C-suites. The previous president comes in and undoes all the work of the previous president, and we're caught in this bullshit cycle of just like childish dick measuring games, and it's so absurd and doesn't make any sense, and you can see why the world is turning away from this. And then there's shareholder capitalism. Again, I've talked about this with the great financial crisis. The people who think that somehow Donald Trump is going to drain the swamps. Let's think back to the 2017 tax cuts and who they benefited the most. To this day, the majority, damn near 90% of the residual effects of those tax cuts, according to the Economic Policy Institute, go to who? The corporations and the people who own these corporations, the shareholders in these corporations. And then there's the quantitative easing that happened by the Fed, which is exactly why right now we're fighting the inflation that we're currently fighting. And then there's the triggers, right? In COVID-19, I remember totalitarian liberal hysteria, like it was nothing. It was just flowing. Talking about you're a grandma killer if you don't hide, for 2 years in your basement and completely shield yourself from this disease with a 99.999, obviously I'm exaggerating, but over 99% survival rate, right? It's like 99.5 or 98.5. Crazy high survival rate. The only people who were dying from this disease were old people, unhealthy people, and honestly, yeah, that was it. If you had prior health problems or you were old as hell, yeah, you should have been careful, and the hysteria for that category of people would have been well warranted. But this idea that we should all be locked up for 2 years and have all of this progress that we had made in education just completely disappear because kids were out of school or learning online for 2 years, all because of COVID-19, which is basically a modern day cold. No, I wasn't buying it from the jump. I wasn't buying it, and I thought that the fear around it was inorganic and had ulterior motive, which was again to relinquish your freedom, which a lot of you people did do. And then lab leak theory, right? Everybody was talking about how the Wuhan lab of virology was responsible or might have been responsible for the Wuhan virus. And that was, if you said that, you were a heretic. And, it was inherently racist and anti-Asian to say that. Then you were a conspiracy theorist if you said that. You might as well be a QAnon anti-vaxxer person. And if you ever questioned Anthony Fauci and the measures that he took to hide his connection to the Wuhan lab of virology, if you talked about that, again, you were, a crazy person wearing a tinfoil hat. But now that Senate investigations have commenced and presidents have pardoned scientists going back over 10 years, right? Suddenly, those theories of lab leaks and that Fauci criticism seems a little bit more legit, right? And then there's BLM. This one was the hardest one for me. I remember a lot of my friends asking me why I wasn't on board and why I was so skeptical of BLM, and it's because I could tell that this was a bastardization of the black struggle. It was a way to commercialize the black struggle. It was a way to appease and satisfy and pacify black people who had made the connection between what was going on economically, right, between social politics and race politics. I saw and I heard from people like Ibram X. Kendi, Angela Rye, Joy Reid, and I could tell, I could smell the bullshit. I could smell it. I could smell it immediately. And the hyperfixation on identity politics rather than economic injustice was the final nail in the coffin. I was like, these people are not serious. And then the latest trigger, or maybe not the absolute latest, but Gaza. Watching what happened in Gaza day in and day out absolutely broke me. To this day, I can't scroll past more evidence of what's going on without feeling guilty. But apart from that, and apart from the way that I personally handled or try to handle what's going on in Gaza, let's talk about what actually happened on the ground. In the early hours of the genocide, or in the early days of the genocide, I'm gonna butcher this, but the Al Ahli Arab Hospital was attacked. Hundreds of people, I believe, between 300 and 500 people were killed. And debates ensued about whether this was a misfired rocket by Hamas or just an attack from the Israelis. And people kept saying Israel would never. Israel presented bullshit evidence that was refuted by analysis by the New York Times, actually, which is funny because they're the same people who released the Screams Without Words. But multiple analysts debunked the idea that this was a misfired rocket by Hamas, especially considering the fact that on average, rockets fired by Hamas that successfully land in Israel have a less than 1 casualty ratio. So usually, even if a rocket does land, it might kill 1 or 2 people if it's successful, right? But usually it doesn't kill any people. But we were supposed to believe that this particular one that misfired and landed on a hospital in Gaza, not in Israel, in Gaza, killed hundreds of people, up to 500, but for sure over 200. And I think it's like the official. There's 2 numbers, but the numbers that I've seen are in the high 2000s up to the 500. So let's cut it in the middle and say 300. 300 people get killed in Gaza by misfired Hamas rocket or Palestinian jihadist rocket, kills 300 people when all of the other rockets that hit Israel killed less than 1 person. Does that, on average, make any sense to anybody? No, right? The government's lack of response, though, to the public outcry. I remember the genocide started in October. By November, there was hella peaceful protests. I went to one of them. One of them had a crowd of around 300K people. 300K. You'd be hard pressed to find a modern record, even a modern number that beats that record. Even the Women's March of, I believe, 2020 didn't have not even half of that. Yet the government responded, or did not respond at all, right? And responded by passing the criticism of Israel bill, right? And this goes into what I would call U.S. government capture, which is again one of these closet demons that needs to be exposed. Let's listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Of the war in Syria, and you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government, starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that?
Right.
And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative. Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people.
This is what I mean.
Abe Schulsky, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that Netanyahu had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you. Because he's gotten us into endless wars, and because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way. But that war was totally phony. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on. These are not even sensible terms.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about the American propaganda machine right there. Focus groups to figure out how people are going to react, then pretending as if the way that we're being herded is actually somehow organic. And then there's the TikTok ban, and the way that this connects with all of this is I'll play this clip from Jonathan Greenblatt.
Leaked audio of the Anti-Defamation League's president, Jonathan Greenblatt.
We have a major generational problem. All the polling I've seen, ADL's polling, ICC's polling, independent polling, suggests the issue in the United States support for Israel is not left and right. It is young and old. And the numbers of young people who think that Hamas's, massacre was justified is shockingly and terrifyingly high. We really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem, that our community needs support. The same brains that gave us TechLeap, the same brains that gave us all these other amazing innovations, need to put our energy towards this like fast. The real game is the next generation.
This is one of the few places I will agree with the ADL on the issue of Israel. A recent poll came out for
TikTok problem. We have a TikTok problem because TikTok is talking about how fucked up it is that the Israelis are massacring children. Speaking of Israeli power, here's Thomas Massey.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What's that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
That's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them. And they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them.
That's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person, and it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that. Everybody but me.
So yeah, there's that. And then lastly, to really wrap up the whole.
This was back on
discussion
June
on the
8th
whole
of
that
1967.
Israel has
They were attacked by Israel both by air and sea. 34 Americans died as a result. 171 Americans were wounded as a result. Now, Israel apologized for the attack, saying that the USS Liberty had been attacked in error after being mistaken for an Egyptian ship. But survivors of the attack totally disagree. They reject that claim, and they maintain that the attack was deliberate. Now, with that in mind, let's go to the Haaretz piece, which you can read for yourselves. It's titled, "But Sir, It's an American Ship. Never mind, hit her." This was back on June 8th.
So basically, if you guys are not familiar with the USS Liberty debacle, it was an attack by Israel on an American ship called the USS Liberty. And this happened during the 6 Days War, I believe. And the Americans, again, were near Egypt, and the Israelis they were afraid that America was going to report on some type of intelligence that they had deemed delicate. So they just decided we're going to attack the USS Liberty, despite the fact that all of their weapons come from the United States, despite the fact that they are completely reliant on us economically and militarily. And to this day, there has never been any type of reckoning, which is exactly why I keep saying that one of the things that we need to do as a country is get back to having serious reckonings for serious problems. So yeah, that's that. And then there's the problem with, or depending on how you see it, I see it as a problem. Trump's inauguration, right? Now, I do say here he is indeed my president, partly because I think that the idea of saying he's not my president when he is factually your president is stupid, but also because I want to give the devil his due, and I will continue to do this. I'm not a resistance person, a resistance liberal. It's no skin off my back to tell or to say that Donald Trump did something good. I think that the ceasefire was good. Israel is still not respecting it. I think that things are better now, and I think that the United States now has some type of, like we've got kind of like the way that Steve Witkoff the envoy to Gaza, told Netanyahu, we're meeting. I don't care about what your religious holidays, especially because he knows that he's not actually religious, he's a secular guy, was like, no, we're going to meet with me. I'm representing the United States. You can't just move schedules around as you please. That's just not the way this works. And I do think that that's a good thing. I also think that the good thing about Trump being in office is the fact that Ukraine, we can pretty much count on being over. Now, the way that the ceasefire agreements or the treaties are going to work out, I don't know. There's a lot of things that Putin has said that are non-negotiable, but then Trump is saying he's not accepting those terms, so it's very confusing at this point. It's not very clear. And also, TikTok came back online immediately after. What else? That's actually about it. But MLK Day, I thought it was really funny and kind of ironic that it fell on MLK Day. Maybe funny is not the right word. I thought it was ironic, but I also thought about Taylor from Richard Wright's Uncle Tom's Children. And if you got that reference, you got it. And if you didn't, I will do a whole thing on Uncle Tom's Children. I'll do a whole review on Uncle Tom's Children at some point. So just stay on the lookout for that. JD Vance, the reason why I put him on here as like a possible upside or question mark is the fact that he has had tendencies to be populist. He was pro Lena Khan. He was, or again, at least in rhetoric, he is a populist. So I don't know if he's going to actually do anything to help the American people while in office or not. I'm going to bet and say not, because he doesn't strike me as somebody who's got a whole lot of cojones to stand up to Daddy Trump. So we'll see on that. Low hopes. But then, as much of a positive as all of this is, JD Vance possibly being a populist, TikTok getting reinstated, Ukraine possibly the war over there being over, a ceasefire in Gaza being delivered. I want to talk about the crows of this administration, if that makes sense. The thing that I would be the thing that I am most worried about moving into these next 4 years. The reason why I called them the crows is because literally the day that he got inaugurated, so on inauguration day, I got a bird feeder and I put it outside on my balcony, and then all of these crows, I thought that like pigeons would come, and but it was just a bunch of crows. And my friend swiped up on my story when I posted on this and said, this is a bad omen. And then I thought about the bad omens that could potentially be coming from this administration, and I thought the billionaire guest list from Bezos to Zuckerberg to whoever else was in that. I thought that if we're gonna drain the swamps, it just doesn't make any sense that like this is the way that we're gonna do it. So something tells me we're not gonna drain the swamps, because we also didn't drain the swamps the first time around. So, and then that actually leads me perfectly to my next point, which is past performance is pretty good indicator of future performance. We've got a lot of ground to make up for, the 2017 tax cuts being one of them. And also I want to talk about briefly, because this is a really long pilot, but briefly talk about lessons from the French elections. The French elections were between Emmanuel Macron, which is a neoliberal, Joe Biden centrist type of guy, and Marine Le Pen, who is a freaking Trump type of figure, far right type of candidate. And they have a multiple round election system in France, and this was the election for their federal Congress, their assembly, the French assembly. And what happened was there was actually a tie essentially between the Trump camp, right? So because again, this was a national assembly, so it's multiple elections. It's not just of one person, but the party that what Trump would have represented, the far right, so the French far right, Marine Le Pen's party, the Ensemble, the moderates, and then the NFP, I believe is what it's called, which is the French left. And even though it looked like the battle was between, just like with us, how we had like Jill Stein and all those people, but we all knew that the battle was between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. There, it was also between, again, Marine Le Pen's party and Emmanuel Macron's party. But guess what? When they went to the second round, because the first round had a bunch of ties, right? When they went to the second round, and it was like, the elimination of all these other previous parties and just the people who had gotten over 12.5% and above, the party that ended up winning was the French left, even though the race looked like it was between the far right and the center. And what does that tell us? It tells us that just like how the French were only voting for Le Pen as a protest vote, I believe that people actually voted for Donald Trump not because they really liked him or not because they liked the direction that he's taken the country, but because they were so incredibly frustrated and angry with the route that the center, our center being Joe Biden and their center being Emmanuel Macron, was presenting, and they just rejected that instead. But in a perfect world, I do not believe that the Americans, if we actually had a democratic process, I don't think that we would have picked Trump. Most people didn't pick Trump, they just rejected Kamala Harris. I'll probably have another episode for all of that stuff, but I really don't think that the current way that people are reading the national mood of like, oh, Trump is victorious and he triumphed over all of these people. I don't read it that way. I read it slightly different, as because we don't have a true democracy in the United States, what triumphed was the rejection of the center and not the embrace of the far right. So I'll just conclude there. And on that note, I will show you Dave Chappelle's closing arguments.
Dave Chappelle ended his opening monologue on SNL with a direct message to Donald Trump ahead of Inauguration Day.
The presidency is no place for petty people. Donald Trump, I know you watch the show. Man, remember, whether people voted for you or not, they're all counting on you. Whether they like you or not, they're all counting on you. The whole world is counting on you. I mean this when I say this. Good luck. Please, do better next time. Please, all of us, do better next time. Do not forget your humanity, and please have empathy for displaced people, whether they're in the Palisades or Palestine. Thank you very much, and good night.
And I think that perfectly captures my sentiments, the way that I feel about this. Obviously, it's difficult for people to put aside what he did the first time around and pretend as if this is a completely new character. And I'm not saying let's do that. But I do think that there's something there, right, about the optimism that seems to be, at least a little bit, seems to be flowing in the air. Liberals and leftists might not feel it. I am a leftist, but I have a lot of friends who are on the right, maybe not like on the right, but who are libertarian, and they seem to be excited, and I can feel that excitement, and I understand that outside of myself and how I feel about this administration, that a lot of people are looking forward to some sort of change. And I think that on that note, I also want to say, do better next time. I hope you do better next time. I do wish him luck. I'm not above saying that I hope he succeeds in a way that is not just about him and his ego, but about the American people and the populist message that sometimes seems to be coming out of his mouth and the mouths of people around him, like J.D. Vance. And and on that note, I will also conclude with a word of the day, which is something that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be, at the end of the day, I'm going to be, with this series, doing something called the word of the day, which is when I either select something from that I've been reading from, or something that I came across like on social media that I just found like funny and cute. This is one of them. Or it's going to be something, and this is an incentive for you guys to participate in the comment section. It's going to be something that I screenshot from the comments below. If I think that you guys had a really good take, I will include it here and of course give you guys credit. So the word of the day is, the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. And the reason why I chose this as the word of the day is because it's the pilot episode, and obviously I'm planting a seed here, and I hope that as we start this new year, still January of 2025. So I hope that you guys plant your own new seeds, and I look forward to the day that we all eat.